Hello. You here for the wrap-up? Yeah, if you thought that that introductory bit was just going to go on for like the entire duration of this video, I wouldn't even blame you. It's been that long. But seriously, guys, no sudden movements. Okay, you're gonna scare it off. You might never hear me do a wrap up on this channel ever again. You gotta make it feel safe and welcome in this new and unfamiliar place that is also exactly the place where I always film these videos. Anyways, hello, it's me, Lexi. If you're new here, that's my name. And today we are going to be talking about the myriad wonderful books that I read this summer, defined as May, June, July, and August, because I still need a little bit of time to finish my summer TBR, but you didn't hear that from me. If this is the first video that you've ever watched on my channel and you're confused by the introductory humor that we've just engaged in together, I typically do my wrap-ups bi-monthly. That's how it's been for like about a year and a half, but I don't know, man, life got in the way. I've been like really busy this summer and also very sad. And instead of like monetizing that as content, no shade, you know, just me personally, I thought it would maybe be more beneficial for my well-being to like work on it in therapy. So that's what I've been up to. And then also I tried to film this video a couple of weeks ago and then edited all of my footage and then corrupted the files. So if you see me in 3 different outfits in this video with 3 different energies about me, none of your business, okay? Just go with the flow. Let the rivers of acceptance run wild within you. But I have been reading. I mean, I have like 21 books to get through in this video. It's gonna be a trek. 2 PSAs before we begin. First of which, my spoiler policy, so that way I don't get burned alive by a 14-year-old in my comments. Unless otherwise explicitly stated by me, I will give you ample warning. I do not spoil anything in my videos that I personally would consider to be a spoiler that would impact my enjoyment of the story. Usually this means I keep my discussion of the plot to however the book is marketed, plus the blurb, plus maybe some events from the first 50 to 100 pages, unless they're like obviously meant to be a major twist. And then I will also be delivering you my thoughts, feelings, and opinions on other things about the book, but I keep those purposefully vague. So that way, ideally, people who have read the book understand exactly what I'm saying, but a different person could still have the full experience of reading that book if they end up deciding based on my review that that book is for them. But if you don't want to know a single thing about anything that you read, I would maybe recommend not watching reading wrap-ups on the internet. I think that you will find that when people talk about books that they have read, they do reference things inside of these books. PSA number 2, if you are intimidated by the length of this video and you don't see yourself getting to like, I don't know, minute 45 or wherever it actually ends up being, please, dear God, read The Raven Scholar. If you take any singular thing away from anything I say in this video, it should be to expeditiously move this up your TBR. It should be to pick up a copy. It should be to join the small but growing movement of people like me who are gnawing at the bars of our enclosures waiting for the second book in this series, because that is also the saddest thing I will tell you today, is that there is no book 2 to this book 1 that you have probably not read. But yeah, just wanted to get the important things on the table early on in this video for anybody who decides to click off early. But that's everything, I think, that is within the public interest for me to tell you about. And before we bravely step forward into the actual wrap-up, I just have a quick word from the sponsor of today's video, which is Thrive Market. Thrive Market is an online membership-based grocer that stocks what I would say are the more upscale, harder to find, healthy types of foods. They definitely have a lot of the normal staples too. One of their main goals is being affordable and accessible. But especially for me, I've been using Thrive for a couple of months now to get some of the things that I've really struggled to find in grocery stores in my area. And I've also had a really good time trying new things as well that I'd previously never heard of. You can sort sections of the website by things like your dietary preferences, or if you're really hunting around for a high protein option or something, it's really easy to navigate the website in that way. And in my most recent haul, we procured, among other things, some new chickpea pasta that I want to try because I actually need to like trick myself into eating the proper amount of protein. Annie's shells and white cheddar, my beloved. I got this ridiculous seawater vibe electrolyte mix that I've been drinking every day for like over a year now for my various health conditions. And turns out that they're actually $5 cheaper on Thrive. So that's pretty neat. Definitely makes you feel a little bit less extorted when you're just buying like sodium, magnesium, and potassium unflavored. I also got granola because again, we're tricking ourselves into protein consumption, and granola and yogurt is my new breakfast vibe for this fall. And just a bunch of other stuff to have and to hold, all delivered to me inside of this beautiful green box of joy and kindness. And being able to get stuff like this delivered to me conveniently and affordably is just really nice, especially considering I don't particularly like grocery shopping. I find it kind of stressful. There's a lot of shapes and colors going on inside of those stores. So skipping both the lines, and also the part where you wander around an entire grocery store and you still don't find the things that you want through using something like Thrive has been really nice for me. And if you are interested in giving them a try, you can either head on down and click the link in my description or type out thrivemarket.com/newlynova to get not only 30% off your first order, but also a free gift if you sign up with them today. Thank you so much to Thrive Market for sponsoring this video. I really appreciate it. Let's get back to it. Okay, hello. Usually there's like a scene change during my ads, but I don't know, we're filming both of these parts today. This is the actual wrap up. You've made it. Welcome back to the Lands Before Time, to what I read all the way back in May when I still thought that I would be talking about these books in relatively short order. We're going like mostly chronologically. Some of these overlapped a little bit, so we took some creative liberties, but we're starting with the very first thing that I read back in May, which is Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. This is a split timeline thriller that follows a girl named Libby, who, when she was 7 years old, her mom and her two sisters were murdered in their homes. And the person who went to jail for it, partially because of Libby's testimony, was her older brother, who was like 15 or 16. And now, 20, 30 years after the fact, she's never really completely moved on from the trauma of going through that, which, fair enough. I mean, that's a pretty insane thing to witness as a child and then like relive over and over again during that first formative year afterwards during the court process. But because the case was so televised, ever since she's been coasting off of this trust fund that was built up by like donations to TV ads, basically, to support her. And now it is running out. And she's not really in a place in her life where she feels like she can hold a job. I mean, again, her brain is broken by everything that's ever happened to her. And she's really on like the dregs of the trust fund when she gets a letter from a guy who is like one of the leaders of this true crime investigation club. These are like the kind of people that are just way too into John Benet Ramsey. That's the vibe of the people in this club. They investigate cold cases and cases that they deem to be suspicious, even though they were closed. This is what they perceive Libby's case to be, because again, it was her testimony that put her brother in jail. And to be fair, she was 7 years old and also in a closet for most of what was going on. So yeah, they basically offer her money to go and investigate people who were associated with the case, go try to get what she can from the police, and just dig into everything that happens. And because she is in such a grim financial position, and also because she's kind of so dissociated from her own trauma, from her own life, she's willing to work with them to basically take their money. And as she goes further in investigating this case, obviously she learns some more things. She figures out some stuff was going on that maybe she didn't know about. And her story in the modern day reinvestigating is told in tandem with these past perspectives of her mom and her brother from like the year, the month, the week, right before everything happens. I picked up this book because I really liked Gillian Flynn's other two books, Gone Girl and Sharp Objects. Those are both like top 10 mystery thrillers to me, so I assumed this would also be a slam dunk, and yeah, it was not. I ended up giving it 2.5 stars. I do have memories of not hating everything about this book. I do remember thinking it was well paced and appreciating also that the main character, I think in general in Gillian Flynn books, the way that she writes women who kind of suck is really compelling to me. And Libby is definitely unlikable, but she's unlikable in the way that you would be, I think, after experiencing what she has inside of her life. So I remember liking her. I remember liking her arc. I remember being interested also in what would happen the entire time when I was reading this, which you cannot say for every thriller. But all of that is just, it's so hazy in my memory compared to what I can see in perfect clarity as the dumbest ending maybe in the entire world. The thing about writing a thriller is that more than in almost any other genre of book, where you end up is crucially important to the experience of reading the story, right? The book is built up around wanting to know what happened, wanting to know what nut you're cracking at the center of the story. Obviously, endings are important in every genre, but I'm much more willing to forgive, say, a fantasy novel that has a phenomenal middle, a phenomenal journey that I enjoy reading all the way through, and then I'm kind of dissatisfied by the ending. That, to me, is 10 times more acceptable than the same thing happening inside of a thriller. And in my experience, my limited experience, because I mean, it's not like I only read thrillers. Actually, this might be the only thriller that I read all summer, which really says something about what this book did to me. But I feel like usually when thriller endings suck, the most common way that they suck is just the author pulls something completely ridiculous, completely unexpected out of the fucking ether and just hands it to you, and they're like, look, isn't that cool? Isn't that a neat way to conclude the story? You didn't see that coming, did you? I feel like that happens a lot. You have plot twists that just, they don't feel earned. The best thrillers and just the best plot twists in general are things that you never could have predicted, but in retrospect, you can see all of the things that led you there. You can see all of the things that you didn't think were important that you kind of ignored. But obviously that's hard to pull off. It's hard to write that without also accidentally making it kind of predictable for some people. And yeah, I mean, I think this is an example of the author completely hedging in the opposite direction and just making something that is so unpredictable, so zany, and also just so deeply unserious in concept and in practice in order to still surprise you, in order to still leave you shocked that things ended up the way that they did. And I mean, I have to say, I was shocked, but it was just it was so fucking stupid. It was so dumb. I tried to read like Reddit threads about it afterwards just to see if other people had the same opinions that I did, because I felt crazy. I thought that the problem was me at first when I finished this, which is just, you know that you're starting off in a bad place when that's the first feeling that you have after reading a book by an author that you really like. But it's true. And yeah, I mean, nothing convinced me. I still think the ending was bad. But the other thing that sucked about this book that further decreased it from just being slightly disappointing but still kind of entertaining into entering the sub 3-star zone for me is the book has, being very vague here, these kind of weird conservative boogeyman propaganda moments built into the plot. Like, there's something that's brought up inside of the story that I cannot emphasize to you enough is completely irrelevant to the central narrative, to the central plot, but the way that it's handled, it was just done so poorly. Even for a thriller, which, for the record, I read thrillers. I do expect thrillers to occasionally be fucked up, and going into these books expecting that, almost never am I actually pissed off. Like, I have a pretty high tolerance for this kind of bullshit inside of thrillers, but considering how I feel similar issues are handled in Gillian Flynn's other work in equivalently fucked up ways, don't get me wrong, I was so underwhelmed by the way that she did it in Dark Places, because at least in her other books, even when you can critique it, sure, right? Like, it's not perfectly handled with grace. At least there, it's like, it's meaningful to the plot. It doesn't read like conservative boogeyman propaganda. There's no other way to put it, dude. And to be fair, I mean, it's 2009. This book probably predates a lot of the talking points that end up somehow involved in the story. So maybe it's just kind of aged like milk in that way. But yeah, those are the main reasons why it got a 2.5 for me, which again, in retrospect, because I mostly remember the things I didn't like about this book, feels a little bit nice, but it's whatever. I'm keeping it. It's entertaining for sure. Things happen, but like, at what cost, you know? After that, I picked up This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan, trying something different. For those of you who don't know, I loved Before I Let Go, the first book in this series. I think that the third book just came out. Unfortunately, this one did not hit the same for me. I ended up giving it 3 stars after like 2 or 3 weeks also of sitting on my rating and trying to figure out what it was exactly that I didn't like about it. And some 3-star books are 3 stars to me just because they're average, they're forgettable. This was 3 stars because it was quite hit or miss. There are things I really liked inside of it, and there were also things that did not work for me that really annoyed me the more of this book that I read. This book is about a woman named Soledad who is a stay-at-home mom. She's in like her late 30s. She's a full adult. I mean, Kennedy Ryan writes romances largely about like full adults in the middle of their lives, and she loves her life. She loves her husband, even when he's kind of the worst. She loves her 3 kids, who range in age from, I think, around 8 to around 15, something like that. But this entire life that she has is completely uprooted when her husband betrays her in this, I mean, obviously tragic and sad, but also kind of ridiculous, comical way. The first part of this book, when you're learning about it, is extremely dramatic, and they obviously break things off in the wake of this. Soledad is left kind of picking up the pieces of her life and figuring out who she is if she's not like somebody's mom and somebody's wife. And during this entire process, she starts to feel this really strong magnetic connection to this guy named Judah, who was in some capacity involved in uncovering what her husband was doing. Roll credits. You can see where this goes from here. Things I liked about this book. First of all, the kids. I feel like kids in romance novels usually really annoy me because I feel like they tend to talk like they're fucking sages at the top of a mountain and you have to hike 5 miles to receive 1 kernel of wisdom to aid you in your quest. That's how children talk inside of these books. They speak in fucking riddles. But I feel like Kennedy Ryan's kids strike a good balance between being cute, endearing, and still kids. Like, they still have kid reactions to things and really big kid emotions that they have to work through, especially, I mean, both of the books I've read by her heavily involve navigating complex relationships between parents and children. This book is also, I think, the first romance novel that I've read that really makes an effort to include autism ref that is across the entire spectrum. Judah also has children. He's divorced and has this really healthy co-parenting dynamic with his ex-wife, and both of his kids are autistic. One of them has higher support needs, one of them has lower support needs, and then Judah himself is not in the story officially diagnosed, but he talks through the experiences that he's had with both of his sons and also the realizations that those experiences have led him to have with regards to himself and his own brain, and how he might also be on the spectrum with just much lower support needs than either of his 2 sons. And if you read the author's note at the beginning of this book, a lot of those experiences are drawn from life because Kennedy also has an autistic child herself. I think because of her involvement with the autistic community through her son and through, I imagine, knowing other parents with other kids, you can tell that she really cared about getting it right and about capturing highs and lows inside of this book. I also enjoyed the dynamic of the relationship in general between Judah and Soledad. He kind of just worships her, as he should, as he should. And just the level of maturity and mutual respect in their relationship is really good. Like, Judah is definitely a yearner. He very much wants to be in Soledad's life, but he yearns without being annoying about it. And also with just a lot of respect for her autonomy and her agency when she's going through such a difficult time in her personal life. The way that Judah handles that, in my opinion, is just, it's very good. But the things I did not like about this book, mostly, unfortunately, Soledad's B-plot. At the end of the day, I feel like a romance novel being long is less about the actual page count and more about how long it actually feels. Because this was only 384 pages overall, which is not like that bad, but it felt like it was like 450. It was kind of a slog because so much of this book, so much of Soledad's story is this, you need to love yourself before you love somebody else plotline, which, don't get me wrong, I mean, it's a great sentiment, obviously. Maybe I would relate to it more also if I were going through like a divorce in my 30s as opposed to just being jaded in 25. But the amount of page time that we get, that's just Soledad thinking about how, oh no, she can't be with Judah because I need to love myself first. I need to go on dates with myself first. I need to be with myself first. It felt like the book equivalent of those pillows with words on them that you can buy from Hobby Lobby. It's like somebody just took a selection of 8 of those pillows at random and decided to make that the internal conflict of their main character. And especially because it feels like the book makes it out to be this primary obstacle between Judah and Soledad getting together, even though I don't actually think it was. I feel like there's something else that the book could have chosen instead to make into that primary obstacle that is given substantially less page time. Instead, it's this. And it's not a real enough conflict to justify 200 pages of writing about it. And yeah, I mean, my biggest issue with this book was just where it chose to spend its time, because I feel like it had the structure and the skeleton of a romance novel I would really enjoy. And I know that I like this author's writing. I loved the first book in this same series, but this one, it just didn't get there for me, even though it did have some things I really loved. Next up, and last book in this outfit. The last time I talked about this book, when I was filming this the first time, I had an hour and 45 minutes of footage. So we're gonna try to get to the point a little bit faster than that, hopefully. I read Blood Over Brighthaven. It was my Patreon book club pick for May. And I say that partially just for context, but also partially because with this book in particular, I think reading other people's opinions and having more time to process my own feelings, my own takes, made me like the book a lot less than I did initially when I finished it. I'm completely aware that this is a book that a lot of people really, really love, in the same way that I love Babel, which it's often compared to. But for me, I feel like this is a story that weakened over time the more that I thought about the things that it did not do. If you don't know what this book is about, it was super duper viral, super big on the like epic fantasy side of book talk over the last year. And it is a dark academia fantasy book that follows a girl named Siona. I don't know, I did not listen to the audiobook, but Siona is a academic research mage. The magic system in this book is loosely based off of computer programming. She like writes spells kind of via code, and mages in the society are like crucially important for maintaining everybody's safety, because the book takes place in what you can understand as a city-state. Think like Monaco or the Vatican or something. And everybody in this city-state is surrounded by this gigantic protective barrier, a gigantic dome, if you will. And the purpose of this dome is to create and protect a safe haven from this. You can kind of think of it as a disease, but it's also like way more violent than a disease. It basically kills you instantly after infection. It's called blight, but inside of this barrier, everybody is protected from blight. And what this means is that you also have local indigenous people who like used to live in tribes outside of the city-state. They are also slowly being torn apart by people getting infected with this blight. So a lot of them end up trying to cross into this city where it's safe. And within the city, predictably, they're treated kind of like indentured servants. Like, oh, you're lucky enough to live here where it's safe from blight, so let's make you do the worst jobs imaginable and give you almost no humanity as a little treat. So that's what's going on inside of this city-state. You have this like super stratified society, and in addition to being stratified by race, it's also stratified by gender. And Siona is the first woman who has ever gained entrance into the like top, most prestigious high society of academic research mages. It's literally all men and then her. Obviously, womenfolk being allowed into such a high office is fairly controversial, so she's treated pretty badly from day one, and instead of an actual assistant who like, you can think of them like postdocs, she's not given a postdoc, she's not given like a real team, and instead, initially as like a fuck you joke, she's given the janitor of the floor to be her assistant, who just so happens to be a Quen man, one of the indigenous people who tried to cross over into the city-state to work, except it turns out that instead of this being the obstacle her colleagues had intended for it to be, Tommel, the Quen guy, is actually really smart. He's clever, he's good at problem solving, and the two of them together, through doing research and working through this problem that the government wants them to solve with the barrier, they end up discovering some pretty complicated mysteries at the heart of this society. If you are a regular enjoyer of Lexi, aka Newly Nova videos, you could probably guess why I thought that this book would be like drugs for me. I thought it would be crack. I thought it sounded so fucking good. I was so excited to read it, especially again, considering all of the positive reviews it was getting from people that I usually really trust. I usually have very similar tastes to. And it's not that I didn't like it. I'm giving it 3.5 stars. We can get that out of the way. I really loved a lot that was going on in this book, but there are portions of the story that just completely dragged it down for me. Again, especially the more time passed and the more that I thought about it. But starting off with what I liked, first of all, the protagonist, Sayana, really unique. I don't think I've ever read a book from the perspective of somebody like Sayana, and I feel like her characterization and her arc inside of this book was fantastic. It's super consistent in a way that I actually think is kind of difficult to pull off, especially when you have a character like Sayana who is pretty unlikable. Like, she definitely does and thinks some pretty fucked up stuff, right? I think there is an impulse to just fix her and to just make her better, make her like a saint. And the book doesn't do that, but it still somehow manages to make you root for her regardless, which I think is really impressive. So much of her arc is tied into the way that this book interfaces with issues of intersectionality and like what it means to be a good ally, what it means to actually support other people who are going through it even worse than you. And that theme and that arc in Sayana's character, I think, is where this book is at its strongest. She's just a really good case study into issues of like stubbornness and defensiveness when it comes to things that don't even serve you just because they serve you better than they serve other people. For the most part, I also liked Tamil and his niece a lot and like what their characters represented, especially as a duo. I also think that the first chapter of this book is one of the best first chapters I feel like I've read in a fantasy novel in the past few years. And also the middle section of this book, there's a particular point, if you've read the book, you know exactly what I'm talking about, that is just so good. It's so well done. And even when I got through to the point where there were some things that were starting to annoy me a little bit and I was starting to notice what was missing inside of this world, I did still love the experience of reading it. So I think that's important to keep in mind because I don't want anything that I say in the negative portion of my review to detract you from reading this if you're interested in it, especially since, sincerely, I think I'm the only person I know in my life who has read this book and not been obsessed with it. So it might just mostly be a personal problem. You might have a wonderful time, but for me, the main reason why I didn't like this book is because within the constraints of the world, right? Because this is obviously fantasy, I feel like so much of it was unrealistic, specifically in a way that I think was counterproductive to the main thrust of the plot and the themes of the story. And this mostly manifested to me in two things, the first of which being the romance. I really did not like the romance in this book. I don't think that it was good for either Tamil or Sayana's arcs, and I think it would have been so much more effective for everything going on inside of this book to make them have a very complicated platonic friendship instead. And that wouldn't even really make a difference inside of Sayana's arc because her whole thing is that she's never really had close bonds with anybody. They don't have to be romantic bonds to be real and valuable. And this is coming from somebody who loves love stories, but I do not think that everything has to be a romance. I don't think this worked as a romance. It wasn't believable. I know there's a lot of people who love it. I know there's a lot of people who love this book, but to me it felt icky. It felt wrong. And the thing is, I actually do think it was realistic for Sayana's character. Again, I think that she especially is so consistent, so well characterized throughout this entire book, but it was not realistic for Tamil's character. It wasn't, there was just such an imbalance there, and it never became the positive thing that I feel like it was made out to be by the end of the story. So that's one thing I really didn't like. The other main thing is, I mean, it's hard to talk about problems I had with the world building in any way that is both spoiler-free and also like condensable to a few sentences. So my apologies. I mean, this is why it took me 2 hours to talk about this book the first time, but the world building and the lore of this book, super compelling. On the surface, I feel like it works exceptionally well. It's really interesting. I love the way it fuses magic with discussions on government and colonization and religion, like all of that, super interesting. I love the philosophy moments inside of this book. But I feel like in a bunch of small, important ways, there are things that are missing in the way that the story is told, the way this world is built, that somehow end up leaving it feeling kind of barren. And because it feels kind of barren during a couple of very crucial moments, the general thrust of the plot, the big theme of this story was weakened for me by a lot. And this was a feeling that, again, was definitely enhanced and further realized through engaging with other people's opinions of the story. And this point is 100% stolen. This is not something that I myself noticed the first time I was reading this on my own, but I completely agree. One example of what I mean by the book feeling kind of barren is that for a story that is largely about oppression, there is not only a startling lack of side characters, like you only really meet 2.5 Quen for like the entire book basically, but because of that, because you don't really get a lot of side characters, there's also a startling lack of any kind of like centralized group of people, any kind of organized resistance that's happening. And as a result, multiple times in this book, you end up in situations where where the 2.5 Quen that we know, every major decision in this book is made. And essentially they're like the Lorax or something. Like they speak on behalf of this entire community of people that we never actually get to know inside of the book. And especially tying back into Sayana being a good, well done, consistent character, I can understand why Sayana would move the way that she does in this entire book. Completely makes sense to me. I think that her characterization is super consistent. I don't understand why our 2.5 Quen would move the way that they do in this story. That doesn't make sense to me. That's the part that just felt so disconnected from the greater community, from the greater lore of this world. But I hope that makes sense. I mean, that's one example of what I mean when I say that sometimes, despite being very interesting, despite being a cool world, it still ends up feeling not fully there, not fully realized, a little bit barren. And especially so in a way that punishes you the more that you think about the book. Because I mean, again, when you're reading it, you don't necessarily notice all of these things at the time. At least I didn't. But the more time that passed, the more I realized what was missing. Again, such as a strong cast of side characters that would have really made this world feel more lived in. And not every book necessarily needs a strong cast of side characters, but I do think that this one did, given what it was trying to do thematically. Also worth noting that this was less of an issue for me because, I mean, I'm an R.F. Kuang fan, but this book definitely has like an R.F. Kuang villain problem where her villains also are not entire people. They're not particularly complex. And in the case of Blood Over Brighthaven, there was one person in particular who I feel like really could have been a super compelling villain that ends up being just as much of a caricature, I think, as the rest of the various evil forces that are at work in that story. I feel like Sayana is a much more effective like villain slash anti-hero slash hero than any of the actual villains inside of the book. But yeah, those are like my main opinions on Blood Over Brighthaven. I do think, by the way, that there's a natural comparison again to Babel and that it's fair. I mean, I think sometimes people are like, oh, it's only compared to Babel because they're both women of color writing dark academia fantasy, and so of course their books would be compared. And I mean, let's be honest with ourselves, okay? I look like this, so maybe my opinion on this means jack shit to you, and fair enough if it does. I think that that is going a little bit too hard in the paint with these two books in particular, because having read both of them, they have a lot of similarities, tonally, thematically, also structurally. I mean, I think that if you read both of the books, you would know what I mean. It was impossible not to think of Babel for me during multiple crucial parts of this story. And also, with Love and Light and Great Affection, I think that both books, when it comes to their dominant primary themes, have the subtlety of a brick. Like, you will know the main idea when you get to the end of both books. And I think that there's definitely more to both of them lurking underneath that first primary layer of theming. And it's there, in my opinion, that you start to see more of the differences between the two books. But with all of that said, as the sun starts to completely disappear from the sky, I have definitely heard of people who hated Babel, but absolutely loved Blood Over Brighthaven. And I mean, me personally, I absolutely adored Babel, but I had more mixed opinions on this book. But they're in the same vein 100%. And I think that if you liked one, you're very likely to enjoy the other. Most people, again, in my life, like both of these books. I'm definitely the odd one out, I think. So yeah, that's maybe my hot take review of this wrap up. And it's not even that negative. Again, 3.5 stars. That's not like slander, okay? But it feels extreme for me, considering that I felt going into this book like it would be a surefire 5-star contender. Anyways, I'm gonna get back to the footage that I recorded 2 weeks ago now. So enjoy the new fit. Okay, I've moved to a place with slightly better lighting. We're locking the fuck in, dude. I'm 3 books into this wrap up. It's been way too long. I can't live like this. I need to be more efficient or I think I'm gonna die. The next thing I read, and we're still in May, by the way, if you're curious, was Phantasma. And this is a book about a girl named Ophelia who is kind of a medium. She can see and talk to ghosts. And in the wake of the death of her mother, she and her sister discover that her mom had like a fuck ton of debt and they're about to lose their house. Just really bad things are about to happen if they don't figure out where to get some money. And so her sister, without Ophelia's knowledge, enters herself into this competition called Phantasma that's run by these like demons from hell. And it's a competition that has 7 or 8 different challenges inside of it. But if you win, if you're able to make it to the end, then the ruler of the house, the ruler of the competition, will grant you one wish of your choosing, which in theory the sister can use to like free her family from debt. Everything will be fine, wonderful. Except the problem with this is that Ophelia is an older sister, she is an eldest daughter, and there is absolutely no chance in hell that she will let her younger sister go into a competition that leads, for a lot of people, to their deaths. You can leave, you can opt out, but a lot of people also just die as a part of the festivities. No shot that Ophelia is going to let her do that on her own and just martyr herself for no reason. So Ophelia enters, she can't find her sister immediately, so part of it is like waiting to have the opportunity to talk to her sister. They're on like different levels of the house until there are fewer people in the competition. And along the way, she meets this ghost inside of the manor who is not participating. He just lives there. Oh no, he's hot and funny and charming and has some kind of mysterious past that he doesn't even know about because he's cursed to have forgotten it unless they're able to like solve the mystery of it together or whatever. So yeah, I imagine you can see where it goes from there. I have historically had pretty mixed feelings on TikTok standard issue romantasy. To this day, I don't think I've read a TikTok romantasy book that I've given 5 stars, but I have read a few that have been fun. They've been an enjoyable way to pass the time. At this point, I go in with pretty realistic expectations, so that's what I was hoping for out of this book, and honestly, I think it delivered for the most part. I ended up giving this 3 stars, and honestly, it might have been a little bit higher had the ending not just been completely ridiculous. That's a problem as well that the TikTok romantasies tend to have. You'll have these attempts at like extremely elaborate plots and world building and histories for the characters, but then there's not actually a massive amount of interest in giving those things the development that they need in a story for them to feel completely realized by the end. But then you get to the end of the book and the author's like, oh shit, I had all of this interesting stuff going on. Fuck, it needs to go somewhere. Oh no, I'm panicking. And they just like toss everything in with a pretty generous side of sudden plot conveniences to make everything work together. And the ending of this one was honestly especially ridiculous. Just a level of Zane factor that I could not get behind. And also, I always find it funny when in a book that's like, you know, how long is this? 500 pages? Yeah, it's like 500 pages long, and probably 100 to 150 of those pages are just like straight up smut or thinking about smut, but like 1 or 2 extra chapters to make the twist make sense, to make the lore of the world function, that's too much. We can't add that. We have to make sure that the book maintains its brisk pace all the way through. But yeah, I mean, apart from the ending, I did find this to be pretty enjoyable if you're looking for a good like brain off popcorn read. The man in general is one of my favorite genres of romantasy man, where he's kind of just like a roguish devil who's really clever and funny. I feel like his greatest sin inside of this entire book is just being named Blackwell. Frankly unforgivable, to be fair. If that'll kill it for you, if a girl crying out Blackwell in the throes of ecstasy is going to unfortunately reduce your enjoyment of the book, I think I would avoid this. I also liked Ophelia, the main character. Her B-plot is that she has OCD, and there was one scene in particular that I still remember all of these months later that I think was actually really good and probably pretty relatable for anybody who has ever struggled with mental health. Just like a really unexpectedly complex character moment. There's a little bit too much smut inside of this book to the point where like I'm just getting kind of bored. And I know a lot of that is because I'm fried in the opposite direction, where I need like 700,000 words of buildup for a smut scene to really hit. But also, I mean, when you do too much of something, it just gets kind of boring, especially when, again, the actual plot of this book, the things that were going on were pretty interesting. I was pretty intrigued at every point in the story to see what the next trial would be, what they would do to beat it, what they would have to give up. Like, all of that was about 10 times more interesting to me than anything going on in their relationship as soon as they started fucking. But I don't know, man, that's just me. It did its job. It did what I was hoping it would do on the tin. I can forgive it for the rest of its sins. But the next book I read, I finally picked up House of Leaves. This had been on my TBR for I think about 6 months before I finally gave it a try. And for context, I did a full spoilered vlog of me reading this book that's like an hour and 15 minutes long that I put up on my Patreon. And that's not me trying to hide things from you. That's not me trying to like not post something that I would have posted on my regular channel. At the end of the day, the actual truth of that situation is that by the time I was like 30 pages into House of Leaves, I realized it would be actually impossible to package a video of me reading this book to a wide audience. Like there's just, there would have been no way to do it on YouTube without my video, I think, getting crushed underneath the heel of the algorithm, because the book is honestly impossible to follow, I think, in a vlog setting without spoiling major bits of it. So yeah, that's why that video ended up there instead of here. But in an effort to give you my like spark noted opinions on House of Leaves, let me first tell you what it's about, because this is a book that people talk about sometimes like it single-handedly gave them early onset Alzheimer's. Like it stole their brain and then it packed it into the oven from the witch's house in Hansel and Gretel, and now there's nothing left outside of this like charred husk that represents what was once inside of their head. That's how people talk about this book sometimes. And to be clear, I think that more than anything else I'm talking about in this video, more than anything else that I probably read for pleasure as an adult, definitely reading this book is an ordeal. I mean, famously, you have a lot of like weird moments where the book, just the form of it becomes so ridiculous, or like the text will just start taking up random parts of the page during some of the important scenes. These are actually some of my favorite scenes in the entire book. But with this book and with other books like it, I feel like there's a difference between something that is challenging to read, like legitimately very, very difficult, and something that just requires you to actively be reading it, to like actively be engaging your brain in a way that, honestly, I mean, it can be tiring sometimes, right? If you sit down for like 6 hours and read House of Leaves, you're going to be more tired than if you sit down for 6 hours and you crank through an Emily Henry novel. That's how it goes. But apart from a couple of key sections inside of this book, I don't actually think it's very challenging to know what's going on. I think that the book just has a lot of complexity that it's kind of begging you to unpack as you go through the experience of reading it. And that level of complexity makes people think that it's like super challenging, it's super intimidating, they're never going to get through it. When I don't think that that is completely true, at least for most people. But with all of that said, let me now give you the like super intimidating synopsis of this book. So this book, you can describe it as a story within a story within a story. You're basically looking through two different windows at this central thing when you're reading this book. And the central thing is this haunted house story about this guy who is an award-winning photojournalist who moves into a house somewhere bumfuck nowhere suburbia. He moves into this place and quickly realizes that his house is kind of weird. It's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. It's giving like TARDIS but sinister. And different rooms inside of this house are like appearing in unexpected places. Like a walk-in closet appears between the parents' bedroom and the kids' bedroom. Or most importantly, a doorway appears inside of this guy's living room that leads to a hallway that just goes out into the ether to a bunch of other different rooms, despite the fact that this door that just appeared is on the outer wall, which should be at least the outer wall of the house. So this guy, who goes in the book by his last name, Navidson, he starts making basically a documentary chronicling his adventures, figuring out what the fuck is going on inside of this house, which gets increasingly creepy as the book goes on. That's the first layer. That is what you are looking at through these windows. And the first window is that you're not actually reading a like transcript of this documentary, and obviously you're not watching the documentary, you're reading a book. The way that you're learning about it is through this critical analysis, this critical academic exploration of what the Navidson record is that this guy named Zampano is doing. You can think of it kind of like an English essay or like media studies on steroids. Like this is the kind of thing that you would find in Google Scholar. You would not just find this out in the world. And Zampano is first retelling like everything that happens in this documentary, but also he's doing analysis on things like symbolism inside of the film, on things like different character motivations that the people inside of the film have. And this whole time as he's doing this, he's citing different academic sources of other people that have written about the Navidson record in the past. So that's the second layer. And that is, I would say, the bulk of this book overall. But the third and final layer, the last window that you're watching all of this through, is this guy named Johnny, who had a friend that just, I guess, happened to live in the same building as Zampano. And then when Zampano dies, because he dies, somehow, for some reason, Johnny's friend got access to Zampano's apartment. And when they get in there, Johnny feels this strong urge to go and take this manuscript, this gigantic like chest of paper that's all out of order. And that is the Navidson record that we see Zampano write. Johnny is putting together this manuscript. He's like figuring out where all of the chapters go, finding all of the different parts, looking through all of these different pieces of paper to figure out what the fuck this guy Zampano was working on for his entire life. And the way that you see this in the book is that there are two kinds of footnotes inside of the Navidson record. You have footnotes that are in Times New Roman that are from the actual text. They're from what Zampano was writing. And then you have footnotes in, I think this is Courtier font, where that is what Johnny is thinking about. That is what he's experiencing. Sometimes it's like challenges that he's having, figuring out what the text is actually supposed to say. I mean, there's a note somewhere about how part of a chapter was like shredded and thrown into the trash can, and he was only able to put together certain portions of it in order to get what you end up seeing in the book. But you, as the reader, have kind of a partner in crime in Johnny going through this entire absurd story. Because, and this is the kicker of the entire thing, this is what kind of like brings it all together, Zampano was writing about a documentary that does not exist. It doesn't exist here in the real world, and it also doesn't exist in the world that Johnny lives in the fictional world of House of Leaves. All of those academic sources I told you about from all of those other people who are doing like media analysis on this theoretical documentary, they're made up as well. Sometimes the people are real, sometimes the people are fake. And Johnny has no idea why this guy would spend so much of his life writing this book. All that he knows is that the more that he reads, the more of this manuscript that he's able to compile into a workable final thing, the more that he starts to feel himself start to detach from reality, start to be driven crazy in the same way you could argue that the Navidsons are starting to be driven crazy at the center of the book in this documentary. Hopefully that makes sense. I feel like that's the easiest way to understand the basic plot of this book, because again, I feel like it's complex for sure. And I mean, because of the nature of what I've just told you, there are definitely a few sections that try to drown you in like academic references and kind of pointless analysis. But in a way, that's also just kind of the bit. That's one of the things that I feel like the author is very clearly trying to critique with this book, is how academics frequently will pontificate without any real reason, and they refuse to get to the point. Like the subtext there with that theme is the text. It's what you're forced to experience when you're reading the book, and hating that experience is kind of just a part of the process, because more than anything I think I've ever read, this is like literary performance art. It's something that you have to experience, that you're meant to feel a pretty wide spectrum of emotion reading, and not all of those emotions are good. Some of them are even pretty bad, I would say, but it's a part of the House of Leaves experience that the author forces you, held at gunpoint by your determination to finish this 700-page chonky monster of a book, to experience some of those kind of nasty, difficult emotions. But everywhere that this book tries to confuse you is on purpose and also completely fucking irrelevant to thematically, like, the overall grand scheme points of the book as I interpret it. Because, I mean, with a book like this, there are about a million different ways that you can interpret everything that happens inside of this story. Almost nothing that frustrated me, and there was a lot that frustrated me inside of this book, was relevant to what I ended up thinking was a surprisingly emotional and poignant main idea by the end. The main layer of this book, that documentary, the Navidson record, I think is at its core super interesting. It is fascinating. Again, I think that the ending is unexpectedly moving. Like, the last thing I expected from the end of this book was to cry, and it took it out of me somehow. I feel like for me personally, the stress of getting there was made worth it by the final destination, and learning about the lore of the house, the ways in which everything is completely twisted and fucked up. Like, I loved exploring it. I found it really interesting, and also really creepy in the way that things that you don't understand, even if they're not like outwardly malicious, outwardly evil, there's an innate sense of wrongness that pervades this entire story that I think the author captured very effectively. So that part was great, but the part that did not work for me, despite all of the really interesting theories I've seen online that make me a little bit more sympathetic, although I'm not gonna like retcon my opinion and the feelings I actually had reading this book. I really did not like Johnny. I feel like Johnny's sections, Johnny's footnotes are almost certainly the part of this book that has aged the worst, because yes, like some of Johnny's footnotes, a pretty large amount of Johnny's footnotes, are you two together versus the text. Reading is obviously a single player activity, but it kind of feels like you have a legit ally in those sections. But the footnotes that are not like that are just Johnny going through different random fucking memories and anecdotes and things that are happening inside of his life. And look, the book really tries to get you to sympathize with Johnny's plight. You learn a lot about him throughout this book, but there are just so many times in this book where I was either completely dissociated eye roll because Johnny is talking for like the 18th time about how he's having sex with some girl that he clearly barely sees as human, and like, oh wow, isn't that crazy? Because then I went to my job at the tattoo parlor, and I guess I would have kept thinking about the girl that I just banged, except the other girl I'm into, this cool stripper, walked in, and now I'm all about her. Like, that's so many of the anecdotes, especially in the first half of the book, and I can't get behind them, okay? Like, I have a tolerance for man. I have a tolerance for testosterone in my works of literature, in my novels, and it comfortably peaks, I would say, at the level of testosterone that you see exhibited in stories like Project Hail Mary and The Will of the Many. Those I can get behind. I fucking love those books, even if they're a little bit man. This was too much. I wanted to know less about his life, actually. And like, to the one person in like 3 weeks who finds this video and goes to the comments to type out something along the lines of, no, you don't get it. Johnny is turning to sex and drugs because he's turning to hedonistic pursuits in order to escape all of the other bullshit that's horrible and traumatizing inside of his life and also escape himself. Like, I get it. I get it. I thought that it was bad. I don't think that it worked. I understand what he was trying to do. I don't think that 25 years down the road, this part of the book is very effective storytelling. And the other problem with Johnny sections, I told you that there were two, is that also sometimes they just become like completely fucking incoherent, and you will have one paragraph that goes for 3 full pages, and I mean 3 full House of Leaves pages. Let me show you what a Johnny page looks like. Yeah, look at that. Look at those margins. Get you some of that for breakfast. And again, this is, I think, an example of the book is kind of just performance art, because I think you're meant to dissociate when you're reading those. I think that you're meant to think to yourself, fuck, I hope this ends soon when you're going through those sections, because I mean, that's kind of what Johnny is experiencing, right? But just because I can see what it's trying to do, again, does not mean I think that it's particularly effective. I also think that, I mean, predictably, based on everything I've already said, this book is really bad with how it treats most of the women inside of it. They're not completely people. They're kind of punching bags for the narrative. There's a portion of this book that just, it really pissed me off, but I mean, that's beside the point. Technically, it's in the appendices, so it's not even like a part of the main story. But yeah, when it comes to what I gave this book, how many stars, I gave it 4 stars. I don't think that really captures my full opinion on the reading experience. But at the end of the day, I do feel like I took a lot from the story, and the way that it like infected me and my thoughts when I was reading it, I think it was just so good. Reading House of Leaves was also being House of Leaves. Like, you as the audience, you're engaging in the performance art when you pick up and open the book. That's pretty pretty cool. I mean, I'm not gonna like recommend this ever to anybody, I don't think. I think you definitely have to be the exact right kind of person who is also in the exact right headspace in order to stand a chance, honestly, at getting through this book, and especially of getting anything interesting out of this book, because plenty of people, I'm sure, read this and come away thinking it's like vapid bullshit. But that's what I mean when I say it's complex, it's layered, because I think that the cool thing about a story as abstract as this one is that you really get to choose what you take away from it. And for me, based on where I read it in my life, the things that were going on around me when I was going through this book, I was able to get a lot from where we actually ended up. So yeah, I can't say that I would universally recommend reading House of Leaves, but I would recommend, you know, keeping it on your bookshelf for like 5 years and just watching it stare at you until you finally feel ready, because love it or hate it, you will have a lot to talk about with anybody else that you ever meet who has read this fucking behemoth. Next up, after that, another tonal shift. I picked up A Dark and Drowning Tide. This was also off of my previous TBR before summer, and oh god, let's start by telling you what this is about. So you have this girl, the main character, her name is Lorelai. She is going on this mission that a bunch of different like scientists from different fields of science are going on all together to try to find the source of magic, basically, inside of the greater world. She is a folklorist. She knows a lot about different types of people, all of their histories and their myths and their stories. That's her thing. But there's also a botanist on the trip. There is a like zoologist on the trip. I'm pretty sure that there's like a geologist or a physicist adjacent type person on the trip. So just a bunch of people from a bunch of different fields. And they're looking for the source of magic, which I understand is ambiguous, but that's because you honestly don't really know what the fuck it is for most of this book. They're looking for it on behalf of the king, who is ruling over this like gigantic empire that exists, that he's kind of just conquered and taken over. Like, it's pretty fresh, it's pretty new. And it also just so happens that all of the different people on this voyage represent different countries that were like conquered into this empire. So it's very much a melting pot, but at the same time, everybody also knows each other. They all have a shared history of like serving together in the military, basically, during all of these wars, other than Lorelai, the main character, who is a bit of an outsider. But yeah, they go on this expedition, and like instantly, right at the beginning, the professor, who is really the only true adult here, the only true adult leading this expedition, she gets murdered. She's dead pretty much instantly at the start of this book, and Lorelai is the person who finds the body. And it's obviously murder, but the only person that Lorelai knows for a fact could not have possibly done it is her rival, Sylvia, who she has this kind of mildly antagonistic relationship with. Their fields are like the most adjacent of everybody who's on the ship, and both of them have long competed for the attention of this professor who has just been murdered. So they don't like each other, but now they have to work together to try to solve this mystery, figure out who killed her, figure out if it's even still worth it continuing on with this expedition. I thought that this sounded awesome. I was like really, really excited to pick it up. And I mean, throughout most of maybe the first like 70% or so, I would say that I was kind of underwhelmed. I was having a fine time. It wasn't bad. It was forgettable. The pacing of the mystery was very inconsistent. You would randomly get one lore drop that is super fascinating, super interesting, and then you'd spend like 3 pages on that, and then 20 pages on kind of useless description and like an attempt at character building that, in my opinion, did not actually really build out or flesh out these characters. I feel like I ended this entire book with not a great idea of who any of these people actually were, but at the time, at like the 65% mark, I thought it had potential still. Sylvia and Lorelai didn't have like a massive amount of chemistry together, in my opinion. Again, mostly because I don't think that they were fully realized characters. But again, like, it's a long book, okay? I thought that they would get there eventually. And the book, honestly, it could have even ended up actually good if we had just gone somewhere else entirely. Apart from where we actually ended up going. It's hard to talk about the ending of this book without outright spoiling it, so I will direct you if you want a full spoilers description where I tell you everything that happened that pissed me off. I made a TikTok about it when I finished it, but the like spoiler-free spark notes is that I'm not sure if I've ever read a book where the politics just take such an absurd 180 and end up so fucking atrocious. Like, it also antithetical to all of the themes that the book is setting up for the entire time that you're reading it. Just suddenly none of it matters, and everybody's fine with the status quo now, even though it's a fantasy novel. And I mean, I think we're trained sometimes when we read fantasy novels to expect that when you're shown the ways that society can be bad and problematic, that maybe the fantasy book will do something with that, you know? Maybe the fantasy book will try to make some kind of statement about how those things are bad, as opposed to just being like, welp, I guess that's how it is. Good thing I got mine though, am I right? Like, that's basically the ending of this book. And again, I think that the ending being as atrocious as it was also shatters whatever fragile characterization the book was attempting to give any of the people inside of the book, because they all in sync start acting in a way that is not even a little bit compatible with how they were introduced into the story. It doesn't even like kind of make sense with the traits that you are led to believe that these people have, especially Sylvia and Lorelai, honestly. And just all of it was so absurd that I actually found the last 15% of this book or so to be extremely entertaining. Just seeing how far we would fall, how deeply we would spiral away from any statement at all on any of the themes that are introduced in this book. It's like the author wanted there to be themes and then realized it would be too much work to actually make them go anywhere inside of a standalone. So she just kind of like shrugged and went, can't win them all. And also another thing, when I made the TikTok where I talk about my problems with this book, I actually got people who were like, are you sure you just didn't understand it? Are you sure that the theme of this book was not just that some things in life are horrible and you can't change them, so you just have to settle for the small joys that you can get? Yes, yes. I am 100% sure that that is not the intended message of this book, that this was not like a nuanced portrayal of resistance in joy, even during assimilation or whatever. Like that was not what was going on here. It was transparently simplistic. The ending of this book is a betrayal to all of the context that you get that immediately precedes the ending. It introduces these interesting questions, and then the book is just like, psych. You thought that this would be worth your time, but it's not. Surprise! I cannot emphasize to you enough how much the ending of this book ruins what is already not even that good of a book. The baseline level of this book is maybe a 3-star, but because the ending was so bad, I ended up giving it 1.5. And honestly, in my heart of hearts, just based on expectations versus reality and how off the rails we really go, this is maybe a 1-star book, but that feels kind of mean, given that, I mean, I don't think that the writing was that bad. The prose was fine. Sometimes it's even pretty. And also I don't want to be out here giving a book with lesbians 1 star unless it really deserves it. And so even though this one might, it's getting 1.5. But moving on from that to probably like the shortest review on this entire list, because I'm gonna be completely real and true with you right now. I don't remember fucking anything about Finlay Donovan is killing it. That's not new, by the way. That's not, oh, I waited too long to talk about this book. This is a situation where I think that I forgot everything about this entire story as soon as I hit page 355. My feelings on this book, what happens, who these characters are, it never made it to the long-term storage part of my brain. It got cleared like RAM as soon as I went to bed that night. The basic premise of this is that it follows an author who writes thrillers, and she's meeting with her agent one day at like a Panera Bread or something, and she's talking with her agent about the novel that she's writing. But because she writes thrillers about murder, somebody near her, a woman, like overhears their conversation and ends up somehow with the bulletproof impression that Finlay is like a fucking hit woman or something and is talking about actual crimes that she's actually committed. So this woman ends up passing her a note and basically being like, hey, I'll give you some absurd amount of money. I think it was like $100,000 or something. She offers Finlay like a lot of money to kill her husband, who is apparently a super evil guy. And Finlay's like, dude, I'm just a mom. I'm just a mom with some kids and a recent divorce from a husband who is also a piece of shit and like cheated on me. And I mean, also I can't pay my bills though. So honestly, your offer is kind of compelling. And yeah, I mean, obviously for reasons, she ends up getting tied into this murder investigation. A lot happens inside of this book. And yet the only things I feel like I can remember is that the mafia are involved again, because one thing about both thrillers and dark romance novels somehow is that the mafia they're always fucking involved. They're always on speed dial in books like this. And also, despite being only 350 pages, there's a whole ass love triangle inside of this book, and it involves a cop, which I mean, it's not my thing, but like he's nice to her, I guess. So there's that. Either way, she's efficient, man. 350 pages, 2 love interests, the mafia, a murder. I'm pretty sure maybe another murder even. This is a whole series. Elle is definitely trying to have her Miss Marvel moment, I think, with this protagonist. So I could see reading this entire series on like a 5-day beach vacation in a fugue state. And you might even have like a 6 out of 10 mildly enjoyable time. Me personally, I did not do that. So I feel satisfied just with this singular book. But that's definitely something that you could do if you want to read something that's, you know, just fine. I feel like this review is coming off so mean. I'm still like on the adrenaline of talking about a fucking dark and drowning tide. Maybe my woke book for the entire year. But yeah, I mean, I gave it 2.5 stars, which it lost half a star for the usual rating that I give books that are like kind of inoffensively forgettable, just because it was that forgettable. It truly just felt like time I could have spent doing absolutely anything else. So, that's why I gave it 2.5 stars. Yep, that's how we ended up here. But fortunately, following that up, I read two absolute bangers. The first of which being We Could Be So Good by Kat Sebastian, also from a previous TBR. Oh, this was so good. It was so good. This is the second romance I've given 5 stars this year. So pretty elite list, elite company with First Time Caller. And I mean, thinking about it now, honestly, I feel like I have somewhat predictable tastes because in important ways, this has a lot in common with the things I liked about First Time Caller. But overall, I would consider First Time Caller to be like 85% rom-com, 15% dram. This book, I think, is closer to like 60-40, but this book is about these two guys who both meet when they're working inside of a newsroom. And even though by all counts, on paper, at least Nick should definitely kind of dislike Andy, they end up getting along exceptionally well. Nick is a reporter who has kind of worked his way up from the ground and has these massive ambitions about the kind of work that he wants to do. Really, really gives a fuck about good journalism. It's also, I mean, it's the 1970s, I think, in this book. So you have a historical backdrop as well on which his character exists. And then Andy, conversely, is the son of the editor-in-chief. And he had no interest at all in taking over the paper from his dad, but that's what his dad wants him to do. So he's basically like forced Andy to start working at the paper and learning the ropes, even though he doesn't want to ultimately groom him to one day become the editor-in-chief like him. And honestly, a lot happens. You get a bunch of like time skips in the first section of this book. So I don't want to say too much about how everything develops because it's so good. It's so good to experience in the moment in the story. But what I will say is that this is like a friends to lovers book that is also incidentally a workplace romance. Definitely is not primarily a workplace romance. For sure, the centerfold for this entire novel is this deep and complex friendship that these two people have over the course of a couple of years and how that alters the trajectories of their lives. And both Nick and Andy are such deeply felt good characters. I feel like there's always such a difference when I read romance between a character who kind of just feels like a bunch of tropes strung together with twine versus a character that feels like somebody real that you could meet on the street or you could have met on the street and now he's telling you about meeting his husband in the fucking 1970s while working at a news rag. This feels like a wholesome story that you could hear from some kind of actual old person who has had actual life experiences and actual tragedies and wins during their time alive. And because the characterization in this book individually is so strong, their relationship is so good. The banter is so good. The conversations that they have. And just like with First Time Caller, the greater cast of side characters is also super duper likable, even when they don't get a lot of page time. The way that they're written makes them feel like people, which is just, it's a gift that some authors have, I think. And I just really liked reading about this little community that existed inside of this newsroom, inside of Nick and Andy's lives. Also, just yearning is so back. Yearning never left for people like me, let's be 100% clear, but I don't care about a relationship in which there is no pathetic yearning anywhere in the story. You can't make me care. You can't pay me to care about people who refuse to yearn. And yeah, I mean, it's really good. I gave it 5 stars. I don't know if this classes completely as what you would expect when I say the words historical romance, but it's definitely a period piece as well. I mean, you're experiencing a queer relationship in the 1970s and all of the challenges that may bring, but never in a sense that properly takes away from the joy and the happiness and the anticipation that you also feel when you're reading a romance novel. Funnily enough, I originally picked this up because I really wanted to read the second book in the series, which, I mean, surprising to nobody who watches my videos at all. I have not done that yet, but it's gonna happen. Next up, we followed that up with another banger, The Buffalo Hunter Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones, and this was what I read on Patreon in June. And if you have any interest at all after I talk about it in reading this book, I would really, really recommend that you read it with other people, even if it's just like one other person that you can talk to about some of the things that are happening in this book. I think it would really like enhance your experience because this is the kind of story that, I mean, I don't know if you would read it in AP Lit, but it's the kind of book that you would read in like a college class on literary horror or something because it's just so dense with allegory and with symbolism and with so many things to say that make up the lifeblood of the story. But what's going on in this book? You're following a woman in the modern day whose name is Etsy, who has just been given notice that a journal has been found inside of like the walls of a church that's falling apart or something. And that journal was previously owned in, I think, the 1910s, like 100 years before it was discovered, by this pastor who was living in a small community in Montana at the time and who was also a direct ancestor of Etsy, which is why the journal passes down to her. And Etsy is a professor who is like desperately trying to achieve tenure tenure. So even though history is very much not her purview, she sees the opportunity in something like this being discovered and in what kind of history it could illuminate. So she starts to read the journal. And like the entire middle section, the bulk of the book, we're talking about 340 of the 400 pages, is just this journal that she finds and that is transcribed without any of her input as if you're reading it yourself. And the journal is split in half. On one hand, you have sections that are written by this pastor about things that he is experiencing in his day-to-day life, but the other half is this transcribed story that the pastor is writing down that's being orally told to him as a form of confession by this indigenous man who has started to come into church. And the pastor quickly realizes that something supernatural, something fucked up is going on inside of this guy's story. So that's the basic premise. But I also don't think it's spoilers at all, considering it's in most of the marketing, to tell you that this is a vampire story, that this is a revenge story as well. And the beating heart of everything that is going on inside of this entire book is Good Stab's story. The passages that you're getting, that's just how he ended up here in this church talking to Arthur. Everything else for the majority of the book, including most of Arthur's sections, they're just set dressing, at least for the most part. But also, I mean, that's an easy thing to say as well because of the fact that Good Stab's parts of this story are just, they're the most interesting. They're the most propulsively written, especially in the first half of the book. So much of what is going on in the beginning of this book, in my opinion, was kind of a slog. But like, as soon as I hit page 50, I was locked the fuck in for the entire rest of the book. Any previous boredom was completely forgotten. It was gone. It was lost to time. And I think Arthur's sections take more time to cook because, I mean, he's a pastor in the 1910s who is well educated, writing about the world. Like, he's writing about the world like somebody who went to an Ivy League school and also will tell you at first opportunity that they went to an Ivy League school. You know what I'm saying? That is how all of his passages read to me. They're infused with ego, kind of pretentious, and written in this historical voice that I think altogether creates this cocktail of something that can be kind of difficult to dip your toes into. But you have to survive until you get there with what's happening with Good Stab, until you start to find that plot line as interesting as I did, which again, it doesn't even take long. It takes like 10 pages of his first chapter. And then I was locked in. Like, the difference between how I felt on page 25 of this book versus how I felt on page 250 of this book, it should be studied. But because of everything that I'm saying, in combination with the fact that this is also a really graphic book, if you have any problems at all, you should look that shit up before you pick this up, because this book is dangerous. I mean, it's a horror novel for sure, but it's also a literary horror novel. It's not like typical super fast-paced genre horror. This is like an art house movie that somehow makes it big and then breaks out into a widespread cinema release. Honestly, it's kind of giving Midsommar. Not at all, not even a little bit in the actual events, in anything about the plot or the themes of this book whatsoever, but just in the type of horror it is, the way that it's paced, and how surprising it was that the movie became as big as it became. That's the vibe that the success of this book that I've seen on the internet has kind of given. So yeah, because of all of those reasons, because of everything that I'm saying, I do think it's kind of a hard book to recommend. For the right reader, if you are the right reader, this will be maybe your favorite book that you read all year. And you have to be down with the sickness. Like, you have to be at once open to some pretty grotesque and violent horror elements, but also willing and able to engage with characters and with a story that is pretty complex, that's pretty literary, that can sometimes be a little bit slow. But if you are both of those things, and also bonus points, A, you love history, or B, you are like violently upset with the state of the country right now, you will love this book. And I feel like for me personally, I was almost the exact kind of reader for this. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. I feel like if I'd clicked sooner with the beginning or also with the ending of this book, I mean, the book kind of has, the way that it's structured, a couple of different endings. And the first ending, which is not really the ending, but it's kind of an ending, is fucking fantastic. It's so good. I was so into it. I thought that it was awesome. But the second ending, I liked a little bit less, and to tell you why would be honestly kind of impossible. But overall, I feel like it took the book into a slightly different direction tonally from the rest of the story in a way that I don't think was perfectly executed. But like page 50 through page 350, oh dude, it was so fucking good. All I wanted to do was read this book. It felt like an elevated version of a scary story that you tell somebody around the campfire, except combine that with the most interesting discussions that you have in a humanities class in college. And just the way that everything comes together into this portrait of the price that has been paid in blood for this country, for America as we know it. I guess not all of you are American, but me, I am, so I'm talking about America. The blood price of this country and the burden of remembering that, and the tragedy of also losing those histories, of losing the histories that preceded this country, that preceded all of these horrible things happening, what that does to you, what that does to entire communities, what you have to give up as an individual in order to survive in a world like that, in a world where you don't write the rules, you don't have any control over the things that you have to do. Like, the book is exploring all of these really serious themes, and then it's also a badass vampire story. So for that reason, if this sounds like something you would be remotely interested in, I could not recommend picking it up more. And if you're anything like me, you will go on to recommend it with caveats to like anybody that moves inside of your life. Me, when I point out this book to my romance reader friends at the bookstore, and I'm like, hey, so this is really different from what you normally read. You might hate it. It might just not work for you whatsoever, but dude, it's really, really good. That has been my experience over the past couple of months with that book. After that, finally, we have some books that I feel like I can rapid fire a little bit, because I went on to film the romance vlog that I did, I think back in July. Surely this was July, right? Maybe it was end of June, honestly, I don't know. But that was the video with that whiteboard that's just been in the background for this entire time. But I read Great Big Beautiful Life, Lights Out, That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon, and then I Hope This Doesn't Find You. And that entire video is spoiler free, so if you want my in-depth reviews on these books, you can get them inside of that video. Most of my opinions have not changed on this book, so I'm going to zoom through these because I have like 7 real books left, and then all of those weird novellas that I read last month. And it's currently 12 in the morning, and I have therapy tomorrow at 10, and I refuse to go to bed until I finish filming this video. So the first book I read was Great Big Beautiful Life. This was the new Emily Henry book that came out this year. It follows the 2 writers who compete for the opportunity to write the biography of this extremely famous socialite who had lived this really dramatic life and then just dropped off of the face of the earth and went into hiding. And while they are kind of competing to figure out who gets to write this biography, oh no, they're both like trapped alone together on this random island, and there's literally no other person within a 10-mile radius of them who is inside of their age range. Oh no, they're both hot. What if they fell in love? That's the premise. That's what's going on in this book. I gave this 3.5 stars, which in retrospect, honestly, I think was maybe even slightly nice. I feel like in my memory, this is actually a 3-star book based on how I think about it now, but I'm keeping it at 3.5 stars for posterity because that is where we started. I think that this is my second least favorite Emily Henry book alongside Happy Place, but not for quite the same reasons as I was seeing on social media, because I actually liked the romance. I thought that the relationship between Hayden and Alice was actually really cute. I thought it was flirty, it was believable in the way that, like, obviously I feel like you would fall in love with somebody in this situation because it's so out of the realm of reality that just naturally, by virtue of being stuck on an island with a hot writer who, like, you go out to breakfast with a few times. Don't lie to me, okay? You too would be a victim if you were in this position. So I liked them together overall, and I also didn't find this to be as boring as some people did on the internet. There were some people who really disliked. There are sections in the book where Margaret is like recapping stories from her life, mostly in chronological order. Some people really could not get behind those sections. I thought that they were mostly pretty good, but ultimately the ending of this book was just such a miss for me, just because apart from the main character, the prospective character's B-plot, so much of everything else that's going on in this book happens off screen, and the book just ends up feeling unfinished because of it, because you're not actually seeing any of the biggest moments in the story. You're like hearing about them secondhand after the fact. I mean, I always like an Emily Henry book. I'm not mad that I read it, but I don't see it being something in the future that I will be particularly interested in revisiting. Next up was Lights Out, which I ended up giving 2.5 stars, but not for lack of fun. Not for lack of trying, I don't think, from this book. This is a dark romance that follows a girl and a masked thirst trap TikToker that it turns out is like the best friend of this guy that she was casually seeing, and through this guy he ends up finding out that Allie is one of his biggest fans. So he does what really any man would do in this kind of situation, and he breaks into her house to see if she's being for serious about wanting him to break into her house, because like that's the kind of shit that she will say in the TikTok comments. So he's like testing out the fantasy basically. And that's what most of the first half of this book is. It's him like testing whether or not all of the like really horny comments that she's made on his TikToks are things that she actually wants to do. And every single time, shock, they are things that she actually wants to do. So for being a dark romance, especially compared to some of the others that I've read, it's actually remarkably interested in consent and in ascertaining that both of the characters are always having a good time. And I liked that. I found it pretty refreshing. The circumstances of this book also are just really impossible impossible to capture in the 2 minutes that I'm spending talking about it right now. It's so silly. They're so goofy. It's so different in tone from what is actually happening, which again, in real life would be harrowing. In the book, they're quirky in a way that is not even unhealthy. Like, it's actually just kind of a fun time. You know, Josh he wants the best for Allie inside of this book. And yeah, he has demons. Yeah, he has things that he's worried about. But most of all, he'll go to alarming lengths to make sure that she's happy. And isn't that just what we all want in this life? I will say, the back half of this book, we go off the rails again. Things get weird. But overall, it was actually pretty entertaining. I feel like this is definitely the most fun that I've had reading a dark romance book, which is kind of a high bar because I am known to sometimes have fun reading things that are ridiculous and of ambiguous quality. Next up, after that, I read That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. And then we can just talk about this now. After I read this, I went ahead and I listened to the other 2 audiobooks in the car because I had a lot of driving that I had to do that month. And I felt like this series was exactly the kind of thing that I wanted to be thinking about instead of the problems in my life that were forcing me to drive long distances. Basically, all you have to know about this book is that it's a monster fucker book, kind of, about a girl who lives in a fantasy world where demons are considered evil, except, oh no, what if maybe demons aren't evil? And also my religion is a lie. And also the demon that helps show me this world is really hot and kind of possessive. That's the vibe of what's going on in this story. They also go on a quest in this one, less true in the other 2. There are fewer quests, but they all have a very similar tone where you kind of get this cozy fantasy world where, I mean, if you take everything seriously, honestly, that's your loss because both of these books, both this one and this one, feel like they were written by authors who are using all of the advantages of writing for a casual audience. These books don't pretend to be anything that they're not. And that's the kind of like trashy romance that I typically like, where it feels like the author is in on the joke the entire time. Like, they're not trying to craft this super complex world and failing. That's worse, I think, than just accepting that there are going to be things in the world that we just don't need to explain, because why go there? The book is not about that. You're not picking up That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon because you want to read fucking Game of Thrones. You know what I'm saying? It's better that it just decides to be its own thing. The book knows what you want and it delivers it to you. It gives you fun banter. It gives you zany comedy moments. It gives you a silly, goofy cast of characters who end up in silly situations across the world. It gives you obsessed men. Sometimes men, I would say, that are too obsessed, but that's okay. And I feel like for the most part, all 3 books in the series, very consistent. They all delivered at an equivalent level. I gave them all 3 stars. And that's like a thumbs up 3 stars because, I mean, I'm self-aware. I can be kind of critical sometimes. So when something that I read as a guilty pleasure is able to pass that threshold, usually it's because I had a legitimately fun time with it that allowed me to overlook whatever obvious flaws I saw inside of the book that also existed. I mean, there's a reason why these were the audiobooks that I chose to read when I was going through a kind of difficult time emotionally. It's because they got the job done, okay? They were fun. But other small notes that, apart from, again, just them being pretty low stakes, casual, cozy fantasy, I feel like could maybe put some people off from enjoying them. First of all, honestly, all 3 of the books, but especially the second and the third, have these weird situations of like dubious consent at times. If that is something that bugs you, definitely the relationships in this series overall are more on the like possessive, controlling side, not in a way that is actually evil or like really wants to strip away agency from any of these women, but you know, they're like gigantic horned up monsters who really love their wives. And that's not gonna be everybody's cup of tea. I feel like the third book especially had the most possessive male main character, but honestly, I think it was probably also my favorite book in the series. I feel like the female main character inside of that book stood out the most from the 3 of them. But yeah, that's your warning on that. It's a pretty consistent thing, I think, in some capacity throughout the series. And the second thing that is also, I think, consistent through all 3 books, although I think it honestly is the biggest problem maybe in book 2, is that the characters, despite being in an epic fantasy land that is completely different from anything we would experience here in the normal world, they're using like modern day slang sometimes. And I want to emphasize here, because I got a couple of comments on it in my last video that and I can see why you would think this, I do not at all mean the fact that generally speaking, they are talking in AAVE. It's not the general internal monologue of the main character or like how she was talking with her family that bothered me. It was like her wondering to herself, am I dickmatized by the fantastic sex that I just had with my werewolf boyfriends? It was reading the word dickmatized out loud inside of a fantasy romance novel. I'm gonna be honest with you, I would really struggle with that even in a contemporary romance novel. And for me, honestly, I don't really know what came over me because I didn't particularly mind with this series. I still had a really fun time. I think maybe because the stories were so zany, they were so silly goofy to begin with, I was able to just kind of like roll with the punches. But it's definitely like the vibe of what's going on. They're indulgent in that kind of way. The last book that I read in that video was I Hope This Doesn't Find You, and this one is super easy to describe. It's basically just To All the Boys I've Loved Before, but instead of writing letters to her crushes, the main character is a people-pleasing overachiever who writes letters to people that she hates whenever they do something to piss her off or like walk all over her or something. And just like Laura Jean, she never intends for these letters to actually go out to their correct recipients, but something happens, they do, it rocks up her entire world. And it turns out that the majority of the letters that she wrote were to her academic rival, who is this guy named Julius, who she's been competing with for like the past 10 years of her life, basically. And now he knows all of the ugly thoughts that she has ever had about him. And they end up having to like work together on something basically also inside of this book. Again, it very much gives teen romantic comedy for that reason, because I am a sucker for a teen romantic comedy. I gave it 4 stars. I feel like this is one of the closest YA romances to that particular feeling of like being at a sleepover with your friends and you turn on some kind of teen movie that they don't make them like that anymore, because for better and for worse, we've moved on from the early 2000s. And it also did carry with it, I think, some of the common flaws that teen movies also have. But overall, I definitely enjoyed it. And I could absolutely see myself reading some more of this author's work, especially since I feel like a lot of her other books are also very beloved inside of the romance space. Okay, next up after that, very exciting. We're fucking finally here. Next up after that, I read The Raven Scholar, kind of on a whim. I mean, this book has been on my radar for a few months just because I had a couple of friends whose tastes I typically share who have really enjoyed it. But I don't know, man. I was feeling goofy one weekend. There was a moment when I was like, yeah, fuck it. I'll pick up this 600-page fantasy novel. No sweat, which I have to say is not super like me, especially this summer. So committing to a book that's this long, and also trigger warning, a book that is the first book in a series that is not finished, probably will not be finished for several years. Just, you know, committing myself to a lifetime of misery waiting for future releases is a little bit out of character. It's a little bit out of left field, but this book is so good. I wish I was talking about this like 6 hours ago so you guys could see the depth of love and joy in my heart that I have for this. But this is absolutely my favorite book I think I've read so far this year. I mean, I feel pretty confident it'll be at least top 2 or 3 by the time I make my end of year list. But for now, let me at least give you the synopsis. Let me at least get you like tantalized, intrigued. So this book takes place inside of this empire that's divided into these like 7 or 8 different groups of people who all worship a different sacred animal. But every so often, the way that power is managed inside of this world, to avoid situations where you just end up with a horrible ruler because they were related to like the previous queen who was good, this empire hosts a competition where each clan of people who all worship, again, a different animal, they all send one person to compete to determine who will rule over the kingdom for the next like 20 years or so. And at the beginning of this book, one of those competitions is about to begin when somebody is randomly murdered. And that's obviously not ideal, considering the fact that the whole goal of these competitions is to ensure a relatively peaceful transfer of power. So, as a result of that, and also other things, one of the king's most trusted advisors is put on the case. And like, I'm fully aware that that description of what this book is about probably sounds kind of shallow. It sounds like not super interesting. It maybe sounds like something that you've read before, something that you've seen before. And I'm trying to think of a way to describe to you why that's not true. What this book ends up being, where it ends up going, why it ends up being so good, even though it has a premise that you probably have heard parts of before, how intricate the world and the politics are, even though they might seem on the surface, based on the description, that they're not that deep. I'm trying to think of a way to capture all of that without giving away even 1% of what makes this book so great as a spoiler, because so much of what makes this book what it is the mystery at the center of everything. And to tell you any more information about anything that's going on really inside of this book would be to spoil a lot of what makes that experience so magical. This book honestly makes me feel like a man recommending a Christopher Nolan movie. Like, dude, just trust me. You have to go in blind. You have to see it for yourself. Except it's actually very, very serious. And I suddenly have a lot more understanding for anybody who has ever said that to me in the wild, because this is just, it's such a special experience. It's like watching your new favorite miniseries for the first time, and you realize on like episode 2 out of 8 that it's going to be your favorite TV show, but it also doesn't disappoint you later. So like the entire rest of the show, episodes 3 through 8, you're fully locked in, experiencing something that brings you an amount of joy that you never thought you'd see again in this lifetime. This is the kind of book that truly, deeply, to my core, reminds me why I like to read. I feel like by page 100 reading this, I was like, yeah, this has 5-star potential. And the further I went, the cooler it got. It's a generational book, one, in my opinion. For me personally, as a reader, because I don't know, man, I know I'm really gassing this up. It's 2 a.m, okay? Forgive me. I don't want you to end up with expectations where you start thinking to yourself that this book will show you religion or like change your entire life, fix all of your problems, because I went into this book just kind of like vaguely hoping that it would be good, vaguely hoping that it would be a fun time. And I feel like that was the way to go. But I know that because I'm talking about this so vaguely, because I'm kind of just asking you to just trust me on this one, because it's really good, I swear, bro, like for real. I got one of my real life friends to read this, and I've since used her texts to try to convince some of my other friends to also read this book. This is like an actual IRL testimonial, because I like pointed this book out at a bookstore and I was like, I'm not gonna tell you shit about this. But you have to trust me, you have to pick it up. And she did, she picked it up. And this is also a person, she doesn't read like a massive amount. It normally takes her a decent amount of time to get through a book, but she fucking tore through this and then texted me this. Oh my God, OMG, OMG, OMG. I just finished the book today and I'm absolutely gobsmacked. 5 stars out of 5, no questions asked. The world building was masterful. The way she played with Redacted was so good. The Redacted about Redacted actually was so good. Like all of the pins she set up in the first half of the book got knocked down so well in the second half. And there is so much open space for the sequels to work with, as well as some super juicy plot hooks to use, like Redacted, probably like 5 paragraphs about different things that are interesting in this book, because there are so many fucking things that are interesting inside of this book. There is so much that I am forgetting. The way I would have described this book changed at least 3 times throughout reading. Like it started as a Redacted, morphed into Redacted, became a Redacted, and eventually became something even bigger than Redacted. You want to know what any of those redactions are, you're going to have to pick up this book. You're going to have to read it. I don't want to spoil it for you. Anything about the direction that this book takes, because it's just so good. At once, it is so classic, but at the same time, it feels completely fresh. It's like a fresh take on all of these interesting ideas, all of these interesting things I feel like I have seen done before, or maybe I've just dreamed I've just dreamed that they would be done before in a way like this. This is the kind of fantasy story that I feel like I was looking for when I started watching Game of Thrones, when I started watching really any of the big AAA fantasy releases in TV and film that have come out over the course of the past 10 years. I was looking to be as invested as I was reading this book. I was looking to feel the emotions that I felt when I was reading this book. And if I can convince even one of you guys to pick this up, to drive your ass to the bookstore, to go to the library, to place that hold, dude, if you invest early, the hold list might not even be that long. That will be a job well done for me, because this is the only book I've read this year that I can confidently say is going on my like all-time favorite book list. The Raven Scholar. Really good stuff. On that note, I think it's time to surrender. I'm gonna film the rest of this tomorrow. I need to go to bed, I think, or like I'm going to die. I have therapy tomorrow at 9:30 and it's currently 2 a.m. So yeah, I'll talk to you in some kind of new setting whenever I'm through with that. Okay, hi. It's the next morning. We're locking the fuck in. So, where was I? The next book that I read in July was I Who Have Never Known Men. This was the July pick in my Patreon. And this was another book that was like super viral on TikTok. I feel like last year, maybe the year before that. I don't completely remember, but it's really short. It's like less than 200 pages. I read it on my Kobo. The book follows this community of women who are kept inside of a cage. They don't know why. Most of the women there, other than the main character, have memories of what their lives were like before the cage, back when they had families and just lived seemingly normally in the world. But the main character, whose name you never actually learn, she was the only one who was taken when she was like a child, maybe even a baby, too young to have any memories of what things were like before. So the only thing that she knows is like 15, 20 years of growing up inside of this cage surrounded by other women. And this community of women is guarded by men. There are men that like bring them food and stuff every day, but these men refuse to interact with them. They're not answering any questions. They're basically just useless and mildly threatening the entire time, and that's it. And then one day, towards the beginning of the book, everything changes and the community of women are faced with new challenges. That's like the basic premise. And I know that doesn't give you very much, but I feel like it was beneficial for me to go into the book knowing as little as was possible about what the direction of it would be. I think for me, this was another book where your expectations are just, they're so high based on how people talk about it on social media, based on people being like, wow, this really rocked my whole world. It like changed the way that I see my life, that I see my relationship to life, my relationship to like my community. And I feel like that's just kind of a result of social media, of like a platform like TikTok. Of course, there are going to be people on there who are like losing their minds over this book, you know? But even though it wasn't like everything I hoped it would possibly be based on those reviews, I did still like it. I gave it 4 stars. I went into this book expecting it to be feminist literature. And honestly, I mean, I think that there is definitely a lens through which you can read this as a feminist story, obviously, just based on the premise alone. But comparatively to everything else that it's doing thematically, the fact that it's about a group of women somehow, despite all appearances, ends up feeling almost incidental to the rest of the story. And overall, I feel like the book is much more interested in exploring things like what it takes to build a community, what makes for a meaningful life, and how to live a meaningful life in an absurdist world where it feels like you might never completely understand everything that is happening to you. I feel like that was the main thing that the book was interested in exploring, which took me completely off guard, because also, even though this is a dystopian novel that's about a dystopian world, it is super slow paced. It's thoughtful, it's pensive, it's melancholy. There's not a lot going on, even though a massive amount of time passes. Like, things do happen, but it's not exactly about what is happening so much as it's about the journey that the main character is going through during the entire story. So in that respect, this is the kind of dystopian novel that I would recommend more so for fans of literary fiction. Like, this is a book that on the spectrum of Never Let Me Go to Divergent is like all the way over here. But yeah, I did like it overall. I thought it was really interesting. I particularly liked the main character's journey and her experiences of loneliness and difference from all of the other people inside of her community, just because they don't really have a shared language of experience to communicate with. I feel like the way that she was still so deeply entwined with this entire community of women was almost more meaningful because of the ways that she felt emotionally ostracized earlier in the book. And there was like a particular section of the book where I just could not stop crying. I could not stop crying reading about what this woman was going through. When I'm in the right mood for them, I tend to enjoy stories that are pretty abstract and that make you as the reader follow them thematically to a unique destination that will be completely different from where somebody else goes with the same story. And for better or for worse, that's definitely the kind of book that this is. And I think that maybe the reason why this didn't click in like a 5-star book, this is fantastic way for me, is that with this story particularly, I feel like there was so much going on that was so interesting that was not fully explored in favor of, again, having a story that is more abstract. So I just ended up feeling a little bit disappointed by the shape that the book took, even though I definitely think I saw what it was trying to do. And on one hand, I do think that what it was trying to do was very striking. All of this is super vague. It's a hard book to talk about, to be honest with you, unless you've read it. But if you're looking for something that is going to philosophically challenge you, that is going to encourage you to really like take your time, engage with the book, feel your feelings, look at the world around you maybe a little bit differently, I feel like this is definitely worth picking up, especially for anybody who is a fan of the literary dystopian tradition. I think sometime during reading that, maybe, I picked up Before the Coffee Gets Cold. This was off of my summer TBR. The premise of this book is super simple. You have a cafe in Japan where if you go to this cafe and you sit at a particular seat, you can meet up with anybody who has ever also visited that cafe in the past. So usually it's somebody that you went with previously to the cafe. You can like slide into that memory and have them meet you. You can talk with them. You can like work through whatever problems, whatever beef that you might have, whatever grief that you might be feeling if that person that you were visiting is now dead. And the rules of like how this works as a method of time travel honestly are so ambiguous and seemingly flexible that you shouldn't think about them too hard. Can you change the future by visiting the past, or do these conversations happen in a sort of pocket universe? I don't know, man. Initially, it feels like the answer to that is no, but then somebody visits the cafe from the future and you like see the scene and the characters react to that scene knowing that that person came to visit, which implies that that visit changes then what happens after that. I don't know, man. Again, these are just things that you can't think about too hard. You kind of just have to accept that it's a magical coffee shop where you go to have emotional, dramatic conversations with people, because that's what's happening thing. You have 4 chapters and they're all just 4 different people doing this thing and having this experience. And there is a recurring cast because the people that work at the cafe and own the cafe are the same. And later in the book, you see people from earlier chapters also go and get their moment. But each chapter almost stands on its own. Like, they're almost separate stories and they just have the smallest amount of overarching plot. I gave this 3 stars. I thought it was fine. I mean, there definitely was a point in the book where I feel like I got kind of emotionally manipulated into crying, as happens sometimes when you're reading contemporary fiction that is clearly meant to make you sad. But the book was fine. Before I read it, again, I was kind of confused as to why it went super viral on TikTok. But now that I feel like it's because it's just super digestible. It's about the lowest stress, most brain off form of contemporary fiction. It's just a really easy and inoffensive read for how serious the themes can also be. I feel like if you enjoy literary fiction, if you enjoy contemporary fiction, this is the kind of book that you can use as a brain break if you want to stay within the genre. And even though for me it ended up being kind of forgettable, I feel like I personally have read much sadder stories that kind of occupy a similar niche to this one. That doesn't make it not meaningful. I could definitely see why somebody would really love this book, even though for me it was just average. After that, I read A Million Junes by Emily Henry, and if this name surprises you, if you were unaware that Emily Henry used to write young adult books, now you know, because I think she has 3 that came out before she ever dropped Speech Read, and I've been meaning to read them for a while, just because I really enjoy her adult romances, and it makes sense that I would also go into the rest of her backlog. And this book is kind of loosely Romeo and Juliet inspired, and it follows these 2 teenagers, Saul and June, who are a part of these rival families that exist in this tiny town. I think it's in Michigan, but honestly, I might just be making that up because all of Emily Henry's books are in Michigan and I was just there. But their families have been beefing for like generations, ever since they settled inside of this town. And for as long as Jack has existed, her family has made basically the only rule that governs her life not talking to Saul, not talking to the children of this other family. But at the beginning of this book, while also going through some unresolved grief that she's dealing with about the trauma of losing her dad at a pretty young age, she ends up continuously running into this guy, Saul. And it turns out that he's actually nice and charming. And you might think that it was all one big misunderstanding, except the kicker of this novel is that Jack has the ability to see what are essentially ghosts that can bring her back to witness all of these different memories of people in her family. And she starts getting dragged into more and more memories. So she's got to sort that out along with her feelings for Saul and also along with her like desire for autonomy within her family. All of the teenager stuff in addition to the magical realism. I just realized that I'm calling her Jack. This is how you know that I just woke up. She goes by June for most of this book, by like most of the characters. That's why the fucking book is called A Million Junes, even though her actual name is Jack O'Donnell. I ended up giving this book 3 stars, and I think I just really prefer Emily Henry's writing in adult romance. I feel like, I mean, just comparing this one, obviously I haven't read her other young adult books, but if you compare the way that she writes characters now to the way that she wrote characters here in this book, I can see the seeds of what has made her into the author that she is today. June's relationship with her dad in this book actually made me cry. There's like one section in particular in the middle that I thought was really beautiful, and just the complex feelings that June is experiencing, grieving this person who was kind of a hero to her, but who was a hero with a really complicated legacy. All of that was really good. That was definitely the best part of this book for me. But I feel like the places that this book left the world of contemporary romance and entered a more fantastical realm, the magical realism elements blow out into a much bigger part of the story. That was where this became a lot weaker for me. Not even for really any particular reason. This isn't a book that produced any strong negative feelings when I was reading it. I just never really bought all the way in to what was happening. I never really cared as much as I think that I should have or could have in order to really make the emotional climaxes of this book hit. And I don't know whose fault that was. I don't know if that was just the headspace that I was in when I was reading this book. I don't know if it was the writing that didn't get me there, the characters that didn't get me there. But the truth is, nothing completely got me there, and that's why this is getting 3 stars. Okay, we are getting so close. So around this time, I read the 3 sentient object novellas that I posted about in my recent video. I'm not going to dignify this wrap up with like complex extended synopses and reviews of those books, considering the fact that I really think that if you want more information on what it was like to read the Doorfucker book, you can just head on over to that video. I tell you everything that you need to know, but there are spoilers in that video. So I guess if you want my like genuine opinions on whether or not those things are worth reading in a spoiler-free context, the answer I give you is they're books about fucking mostly anthropomorphized anthropomorphized versions of sentient objects. And that's it. They're about 80 pages long. I will say that Squeak had a startling amount of character development inside of it, given the fact that it was about a fucking polyamorous triad of balloon animals. I don't really think that it would stand on its own, but like, again, it's not meant to. It's not meant to stand on its own. So would I recommend them to anybody? I mean, if you're curious, it'll take you about 35 minutes to get through them, and then you'll know everything that you need to know. I don't even think I actually gave star ratings to these books, and honestly, I don't even know where I would begin. I feel like something this ridiculous completely breaks my scale. But I feel like, if anything, Unhinged and the Kool-Aid Man book, those would get 2 stars, and then Squeak might get 3, just for ambition. You gotta reward people for thinking outside of the box. But yeah, I mean, I guess that those are technically a part of this wrap up. But next up, after that video, I needed a little bit of a palate cleanser. So I picked up Little Thieves by Margaret Owen. And this book was awesome. I feel like overall, I mean, as you've seen, we definitely have been a little bit hit or miss, but this summer has had a lot of bangers comparatively to the rest of the year so far. I gave this book 5 stars. I think it's maybe the first YA fantasy I've given 5 stars this year. I don't know if I'm lying to you. I'll tell you in post if I am, but I loved this. It is a super loose retelling of an obscure Grimm's fairy tale called The Goose Girl, and it follows a girl named Vanya who, through the acquisition of some magical relic, was able to successfully seal the place of the princess that she was previously lady's maid for. So she sent that princess to basically work in the streets, in the stables, and is now living the life of luxury that the princess once lived. Not because Vanya actually wants to live as a princess. She doesn't really have any interest in that whatsoever. But Vanya was forsaken by her parents at a really early age because as the 13th child of a 13th child, she was deemed to be super bad luck, the reason for all of the problems in the world, really. So her mom took her to a crossroads and basically gave her as an offering to the gods of death and fortune. But instead of like sacrificing her or eating her or something, the gods of death and fortune just kind of decided to adopt her and co-parent all the way until Vanya turns 13. And suddenly her parents want her to choose who to serve forever between the two of them. And Vanya doesn't want to do that. She has a lot of really complicated feelings around people who are essentially her parents asking her to enter into a life of indentured servitude. So she's trying to save up enough money to flee the kingdom, because if she's able to flee the empire where people worship those gods the most, then they'll have less power in the other places of the world, and hopefully Vanya will be able to kind of slip through the cracks because she'll be beyond their purview. And we're back to the fact that she's posing as a princess now. Being a princess is really convenient for trying to get a lot of money, because Vanya can just go to all of these fancy parties and galas and like sneak off and steal all of the jewelry from all of these noble people. And nobody suspects her because she herself is supposed to be super rich. She's a princess. She's betrothed to one of the most important people in the entire kingdom. So that's where we start off. But everything is kind of going to shit in like the first 2 chapters of this book because of a combination of factors. First of all, her fiance has called in a bunch of detectives from a different land, who are like not only just detectives by trade, they also have access to this like justice detective magic that they can use to find and catch criminals and like take them to magical god court or whatever. So her fiance has called these people in to try to find the person who is stealing all of this jewelry from all of these nearby nobles, not knowing, of course, that it's his fiance who is not in fact his fiance. And it just so happens that one of the detectives who is coming in to investigate the case is also a teenager. He's a detective in training. He's really smart, super awkward, kind of pathetic and wiry. Just my type in men, you could say, but you didn't hear that from me. So that's a problem. Obviously, she's trying to hide really her entire life story from this person who now really wants to interview her and figure out what's going on. But also, at the same time, she's just been cursed in the wake of a theft where she accidentally stole some kind of like magical relic that was gifted to the noblewoman by a god. That god was really pissed off that she stole that, so they cursed her because of her greed to become that which she desires. And she's like slowly turning into jewels. It's quite the conundrum. There's a lot that goes down inside of this book. I fucking loved this. I thought it was great. This is like peak YA to me, where it's young, it's exciting, but it's not like annoying. It doesn't feel immature. I really liked Vanya. I liked that she kind of encompasses a lot of the prototypical, not like other girl tropes, but not in a way that is romanticized at all by the narrative. Like she's pretty obviously flawed and kind of fucked fucked up and traumatized by her upbringing and just by her life being what it was. And it's made her into this like very acerbic, untrusting, independent to a fault person, but in a way where you still root for her. You still want the best for her, even though you see all of the places where she's going wrong consistently in the story. Because at the end of the day, she's really just a fucked up kid. And I liked the fact that she was surrounded by people who made it very clear to her that she's still deserving of love, that she's still deserving of a full life. I'm not going to say on my public YouTube account that I found it relatable at all, but you could say that maybe somebody would out there. I also thought that this book was pretty funny. The fairy tale elements are also good. I loved the way that the supporting cast was not exactly what you would expect them to be, I don't think, when you go into the book. I think that you get a really good found family contingent that grows throughout this story. And the ending was a delight. It was so good to the point where I know that this is supposed to be a trilogy. I'm aware that there are 2 other books. It's part of why it took me so long to pick up this one. But I also know that I have some other creators that I really respect who did not like the other 2 books nearly as much as the first one. And that scares me. I'll be honest with you. I can totally see why more of the series could create more harm than good when it comes to the character dynamics that are established by the end of this book. And because the ending works so well, in my opinion, as a standalone ending, I'm a little bit worried to continue. So I don't know if any of you guys have read the entire series. I would love to know what you think, because that is a decision that I'm going to need to make with this series. I did really love this one. I thought it was great. Next up, after that, we're almost done. We're almost through. For August, for my book club, we read Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. And I was excited about this because I also have a soft spot in my heart for sports romance. I don't know, man. I just love stories about teams, especially underdogs, succeeding in some capacity in a competitive environment. It's free dopamine, you know? Who would I be to leave that on the table knowing I am who I am? And this is Ali Hazelwood's BDSM sports romance. I say that in air quotes, not because this isn't intense enough for me or because it's not a legitimate display of what power exchange can look like in some couples, but just because it's BDSM in the same way that Bride was Omegaverse, where it's like, okay, yes, you have some elements that you would expect from an Omegaverse fanfic inside of Bride, but really not very much. It's really like a beginner's guide, basically, to nodding, and that's it. That's what Bride was, in the same way that, yes, in this book, they have a lot of discussions about kinkiness, informed consent, doing things that are a little bit more like dom-sub dynamic and what it means to have full and open conversations about those things. But like, it's really not that intense. It's not that kinky. It's not something that I am surprised to see in a contemporary romance, especially since, I mean, I feel like a lot of romance novels where this dynamic just exists and they never talk about it. They don't say a single fucking word. The actual premise though of this book, let me tell you before we go anywhere else, this is about a girl named Scarlett who is basically suffering from the swimming equivalent of the yips, where after a really bad accident where she fucked up a particular kind of dive like a year or 2 ago, Scarlett has completely lost the ability, the muscle memory to repeat and do that particular kind of dive, even though she can do any other kind of dive that she needs to do for competition. And it's really fucking her career. And Lucas, the male main character, is also a swim athlete. He's like a normal swimmer, and he is a swimming prodigy. He has won multiple gold medals at the Olympics. He's Swedish. They're both swimming, by the way, for their college team at Stanford. And at the beginning of the book, Lucas has just broken up with his long-term girlfriend of several years, who just so happens to be Scarlett's dive captain and like her new best friend. And the breakup seems mutual. It seems fine. I mean, it was actually mostly Penn who wanted to break up with him to begin with because, I mean, she overshares to her friends that the big reason why she wanted to break up with him was because she did not share his kinks, basically. And also she wanted to see if she might be more satisfied in a different relationship in the future. So Scarlett hears about this, and it turns out she's also into the same thing. Turns out that Penn, after hearing that Scarlett is into the same thing, gets like super fucked up at a party and brings the 2 of them together and is like, you guys should bang. Which is just such an out-of-pocket thing to do. Genuinely such an out-of-pocket thing to do, but whatever. So now they're both aware of it, and yeah, I mean, they start up a relationship, and it's completely sexual. Like, it's very much no strings attached type beat initially, but obviously as the book goes on, things become a little bit more complicated. A couple of things about this book. First of all, I think I'm giving it 3 stars. It's like, I don't know, book number 15 in this wrap-up that ended up in 2.5 to 3.5 star purgatory, but that's where it lives. It's definitely, I think, my least favorite Ali Hazelwood novel that I've read. Not because it was bad. I mean, Tonally, Ali Hazelwood books, to this day, even with this one, they're like so consistent. You know exactly what you're gonna get on the tin. And especially the more that I read of this book, the more that we went on. It's like 450 pages, by the way. And the closer we got to the 450 page mark in my fucking romance novel, the more I was thinking to myself, dude, I want this to be over so badly. And that is really the main reason why it got 3 stars. It's just easily 100 pages too long. And it wasn't even that there was a lot of smut, which there is a lot of smut, but it's mostly for me that I got bored. It was the same exact thing basically over and over and over again. And I don't know, it was like fun maybe the first 2 times, but then it just kept going with not enough emotional development as well going on inside of the relationship that made me actually root for them as a couple as opposed to just as 2 individuals. And then all of that builds up to the way that this book ends is it's so stupid. The ending is so bad. It is the most predictable thing that I think I've read all summer, honestly. Like, it goes exactly where you have expected it to go the entire book. But the entire book, you're holding out hope because you also see another path diverged in the Yellow Wood. You see a path where something interesting and subversive can be done to create the inevitable 90% conflict that isn't the thing that you've been expecting to happen the entire book. But then it happens anyways. And it's like, it's completely at that point out of character for what you were told the entire book is true inside of these relationships. And it sidelines any development that you got in favor of doing, again, the most predictable thing of all time and just having the ending where you get to tie everything up with a bow, but like the bow is made of poison ivy and now I have a rash. You know what I mean? All of that is vague, obviously, but I didn't like it. I feel like a lot of the sour feelings I was already having with the length of this book were just made worse by the fact that we ended up in a place where it feels like we could have ended up 150 pages sooner. And it just kind of ended up feeling like wasted time once I got to the end. That in combination with the fact that Lucas was like such a non-character to me. Who is this man in actuality, other than being extremely tall and competent and like stoic, but also perfectly understanding at all of the most perfect times in this book, despite the fact that earlier examinations of his character might indicate that he might have, you know, any amount of internal conflict at all. But all of that just entirely disappears in the second half of this book to make him completely uninteresting. Like, who is this man? I don't know. I don't know anything about him other than that he's Swedish. I don't know. I mean, honestly, the more that I've thought about this book, the less I've liked it. But, you know, that's okay. They can't all be bangers. They can't all be exactly what you want them to be. Fortunately, Ali Hazelwood releases like 3 books a calendar year, so chances are something else that she puts out this year is going to appease me. Anyways, the last book that I read in August, and this one will be really short, but it's Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. I literally just made a full-length video on this book, so if you want to see all of my opinions on this, you can check out that video. I would recommend actually going and checking out that video first, because rather than telling you what this is about or what I think about it since you just heard it, instead I want to talk a little bit about how my opinion has changed and continued to evolve as more time has passed since I finished the book, since I posted that video, and especially since I've had the opportunity to talk about it with Eden and with other people who have finished it, who are my friends online. I initially gave this book 4 stars. I think that right now, in retrospect, I would maybe give it 3.5, but I don't know, man, it's pretty close. It's definitely still somewhere in that range, but I do think that my opinion has soured a little bit over time, just because what I find myself returning to and what I find myself continuing to think about are the flaws that I felt right after I finished the book. And I feel like the bad with this book specifically is so memorable because of the potential that I feel like it had to make for a cohesive story, maybe with a little bit of a finer toothed comb in editing. I don't know, man. I feel like all of the pieces were there when I was reading this book, and that's what makes it so disappointing that they didn't completely come together into a beautiful picture by the end. But as I'm diving like headfirst into watching all of the videos and reading all of the discourse around R.F. Kuang online, honestly, it just makes me kind of angry, because I swear to God, people who like R.F. Kuang can be just as annoying as people who don't like R.F. Kuang. As I said in my video, I think it's a stupid take to go into a book like this and then be surprised that it has academic references. But also, I think it's a really stupid take to critique somebody who went into a book like this and then found the execution of those things to be somehow lacking. I think it's insane to just assume that that person must be stupid. Like, they must not understand it. They must just not get it the way that you do. Just the way that people talk in circles online about this author baffles me to no end. Every time R.F. Kuang releases a new book, I hope that she's able to go away into like a little cave where she doesn't have to see the sun or the internet and she can just relax in peace and like eat cinnamon rolls and drink tea and know serenity for the first time in her life. I know she doesn't do that, but I wish that she could, because I feel like if I was the person who wrote this book and every time I released anything, it created people like this, it would genuinely drive me into an early grave. I don't know why people can't be normal online about this author. And speaking fan to fan, okay, R.F. Kuang defender to R.F. Kuang defender, going after every single person who dislikes R.F. Kuang books as if they've committed some kind of mortal sin is embarrassing. It's embarrassing. Like, two things can be true at once. She can face, I think, an additional level of scrutiny and critique because of who she is, because she is a highly successful woman of color writing as a young person as well in an industry that is not super welcoming to any of these things. And also, at the same time, some of that critique can be valid. It can be subjectively valid for some people who engage with and read her books. There's a difference between somebody who engages in bad faith with an R.F. Kuang book and then has stupid opinions on it that honestly I feel like you should just not engage with usually on the internet. Like, you should just not give attention to people who you think are like rage baiting you. I would say that that is typically a good practice, but there's a difference between people who are just kind of trying to rage bait and like, we're never going to like a book like this to begin with, but picks it up anyways because they wanted to rage bait, and somebody who is actually expressing real critique based on their own informed personal opinion. And I just feel like sometimes there's a contingent of people on the internet who will yell at both of these people as if they're doing the same thing when like they're not. And it's okay to have different opinions than somebody on a book because you can have a discussion about it, right? You can like see what they took from it that you didn't and vice versa. And maybe you both end up changing your opinion. I don't know. Crazy how like talking about literature with a person can do that for you sometimes. I probably sound kind of bitter right now, but I'm actually not bitter at all. I'm really tired. I did not get very much sleep last night, unfortunately. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say on this. I did still like it overall, absolutely. For me personally, it was for sure worth my while, but my opinion on it has gone down a little bit just because I think what's really sticking in my memory are the things that I wish were better. So yeah, that's my update. But that's it, I think. That's everything that I read this summer, or at least that I read this summer up to close to the end of August. We are going back to bi-monthly wrap-ups. I just missed one, okay? I've been like very consistent for the past 2 years apart from that. I'm sorry for the length of this video. I imagine you've been here for a while. It's been a feature film, just me talking through everything that I've read away from you this summer. But hopefully you got something out of it. Hopefully you read The Raven Scholar. I think that is the best advice that I could give to you if you would like to improve your quality of life immensely in the near future. But until next time, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for being here. You rock. Yeah, I don't have anything else to say. Bye.